You're listening to Mad Radio. Mad Radio. Mad Radio. Make a difference.
Quick, me lads! Hoist the rigging! Aye, Captain! Splice the main brace! Batten down the hatches! Aye, Captain! I'm going below deck to get the show started. And now, a man who owns a pub with more puppets than Pee-wee's Playhouse. It's Mr. Mechaleka Hi Mechaheimi Ho himself, Brandon McCarty.
Well, thank you, Petey. Yeah, thanks a lot. Welcome in, all you scallywags, you swashbucklers, landlubbers, hornswogglers, and salty dogs, to the Peg Leg Podcast, a show where we delve into the lives of fellow pirates and learn a bit more about the unsung heroes among us all. Arr! This week, we travel to the Distance Education Department to speak with an individual who has been teaching with technology since 1999, when he began putting course handouts on his webpage. He graduated from Santa Rosa Junior College and earned a BA from UC Berkeley before completing his PhD, holy moly, at the University of New Mexico. He taught composition and literature classes for 20 years before becoming the Distance Education Coordinator at MJC in 2012, where he supports faculty learning to teach online courses. He has been a certified Blackboard trainer, a Blackboard Catalyst Exemplary Course Award winner, an @1 certified online instructor, along with an @1 peer guide, and an OEI lead course reviewer. We're going to ask about that. He is the 2021 recipient of MJC's Purdy Award for Excellence in Education and the Beacon of Hope Award. He also serves on the board of the Northern San Joaquin Valley Air Pollution Control District, and when he's not at his computer, which basically sounds like it's all the time, he enjoys spending time with his wife and 2 kids who are now in college. He also enjoys cooking, running, backpacking, playing golf, and fly fishing. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome to the poop deck, Mike Smedshammer.
Well, thank you very much, Brandon. It's quite an honor to be here on the Peg Leg Podcast.
You have quite the rap sheet here.
Yeah, thank you. It's kind of cool to hear all that stuff at once. That's great. Thank you.
So, Mike, how did you find your way to MJC? What was the pathway there?
Well, there I was.
That's a good start.
The pathway was, I'll cut to kind of the chase, which is that I was looking for work, and I had what's called a 1-semester sabbatical replacement position at College of the Sequoias. So I'd finished my graduate school, and I was looking for a full-time job. And I had a 1-semester full-time job. It was a limited full-time job at COS, College of the Sequoias, down in Visalia, California. And I had scored an interview there for the full-time job that would go on forever. And my life and everything would have been in Visalia, a beautiful little town. I recommend it if you haven't visited there. It's one of the sweet valley towns that are in California. And I got the job. They'd offered me the position and everything. And so things were looking kind of good, except it was a long way from my family, long way from everything, long way from a decent airport, a long way from it was kind of, you were isolated out there.
Oh.
So I had applied to a few places other than the COS job, and Modesto called. And after I had accepted the COS job, my wife, who was pregnant with our daughter in Santa Rosa, she was living with my parents at the time. That's another branch of the story I'll just not worry about right now. But I was always driving home there to Santa Rosa, and I would always go right through Modesto. I would come right up 99. And I knew that it was on my way, so to speak. And I knew that the interview time that they had offered me fit with how my last class down at COS. And so even though I had accepted the job and everything, and I told everybody, and a lot of backslapping, and everybody was happy, I pulled off the road. I had my suit and my interview suit and everything all set to go, and I pulled off the road right there on Kansas Avenue off 99. And I pulled into the parking lot at MJC. I'd never been to the campus before. I pulled off and pulled into the parking lot by the music building at that time. And it's still that time. What am I talking about?
Oh, the small one right
there. The small one.
Okay.
Yeah, the small one by Founders Hall. And I got out of the car, and what hit me was the smell of the trees. There were, this great big kind of evergreen trees at that time were there, and I was hit by the smell of it. And at first I was like, ooh, this smells good. And so that my first impression of it was really positive. And then I went to do the interview, and because I'd been given a full-time job already and I'd had some practice interviewing by that point, I had the security of the job in my pocket. So I really was myself. And the person that first met me to get me set up for the interview was Silvana Morris, who was one of the great long-time division secretary in literature, language arts at that time. Total sweetie, and she's retired and moved away, and I miss her a lot. But she was so nice to me. And another faculty who's no longer with us, he saw me and he kind of said, and he was an Irish guy, and in his accent he said, "Well, good luck, young man," to me. And I just got a really good feeling off all that. And then the interview itself was so positive. It was other people who have now retired were on that. Now I'm that guy, but they've all retired. But we met in a classroom, and they were just really great to me. And we had a wonderful, very relaxed, very comfortable conversation, largely because I felt comfortable. They made me feel comfortable. We clicked immediately. And when they offered me the job, I said, you know what? I'm going to have to be kind of selfish right here, because this is one of those life transitions. And even though your honor is at stake with the College of the Sequoias, and you have said yes, and you've done everything, I had to break that little agreement and cause them some problems. But I just couldn't help it. It was just it felt too good to say no to. It was 2 hours closer to my family in the northern Bay Area, in Santa Rosa and Petaluma. And so that's what I did, and I have not regretted that decision one bit. Yeah, that's how I got to MJC.
That is awesome. That's I've heard quite a few stories so far, and wow, you had a job, and then you decided, no, I think I like it here better. That's awesome. So, where did you grow up?
Well, I grew up in that town I was mentioning, in Santa Rosa. I grew up there. And a couple things about that might be interesting to people is that I did go to Santa Rosa Junior College. I went to Santa Rosa High School. Santa Rosa Junior College is literally the next door over is this junior college. It's the only other junior college still left in the state of California. So there's an affinity there with MJC and SRJC. So I went to school at that place. My English teacher, I was not especially good at English then, and so I thought, no matter what I do, I'm going to need to know how to write. And my high school teachers have convinced me I'm kind of terrible at that. So I better take some English classes and get this fixed, because I'm going to need to know how to write. And I kept taking English classes, and I had spectacular teachers, and they helped me learn how to do it. And I thought, oh, I think I might major in this subject. And one of my professors at that school, Pat Pacheco, one of the early victims of the AIDS epidemic, unfortunately, I learned about his passing by reading a poem in a book of poetry. He was named, and that's how I found out that he'd passed away after I'd moved away. It's one of those crazy things, but he was a wonderful, wonderful instructor, and he wore these like corduroy, big, oversized sport coat jacket things and kind of crazy hair. And he would go to San Francisco and go to plays and things, and then come back from that and share those stories with us when we were in class about what he had done in the city. And he was just amazing. And I watched him and I thought, you know what? I want that guy's job. That guy seems to have the best job in the world. He talks about literature, and then he goes to the city and goes to performances. And I'm not sure I would do that exactly, but I'd have a lot of downtime to play golf.
Okay.
So I had this impression that that's what I would get to do. The other part about growing up in Santa Rosa was that my mom grew up there too, but my dad had moved to Santa Rosa from North Dakota, of all places. He wanted to escape the cold, so he'd moved to California, and he was a junior high school counselor. That was his job. So it's incredible to me now, but in those days, in the 1970s we're talking about, a person could be a junior high school counselor and buy a house and not have your spouse work. Those days are over. We don't have those days anymore. But it worked out so that my mom was not working in those days. Dad had summers off. So in the summer, we would get into the family station wagon and drive all the way back to North Dakota to live on the farm for 2 months. And his brother, my uncle, he ran the farm. It was a grain farm, no animals. So in the summertime, there was harvest going on, and combines and swathers, and getting tractors ready to go, and driving trucks around and moving grain from grain bins to the elevator in town. And it was a whole country living that was entirely different than California living. And so I did that my whole life from the time I was born until I was 18. Every summer we spent the summers in North Dakota. So I got kind of a really good exposure to two ways of life, and two different kind of family styles. Because honestly, the people in the rural Midwest, Northern Plains, I'm not sure where North Dakota exactly fits into there, but their families are so much tighter. They're so much more connected, and that felt really good to feel what that was like. A different kind of family bond that they have there that goes beyond just how are you doing on the holidays, Yeah.
Well, I'm sure that all of those long rides in the car certainly made you very cohesive in that way.
Yeah. My dad outfitted the station wagon he had banana boxes, banana crates. They were crates that you would ship bananas in, heavy duty cardboard. And he would make a bed in the back so that in the station wagon there was one slot where you could put a sleeping bag down as a kind of a pad, and then one kid could sleep there horizontally. You couldn't stand up or anything, but you kind of squeeze in this slot that he made. And so every year it was really cool. We'd drive out Interstate 80 and then go north through Pocatello, Idaho, and then across through a little bit of Yellowstone, West Yellowstone, and Montana, and then across the Badlands of North Dakota. And so it was usually a long, in those days, if you went 500 miles in one day in a station wagon, it just felt like Oh my gosh, we're never gonna get there, but eventually we always did. Fun times.
My gosh. So we mentioned some of the hobbies that you have outside of work, and I want to touch on just a couple of them here. Backpacking. I've done some backpacking. Maybe you can kind of tell us about some of the places that you really love or that you gravitate towards, and then maybe some of the fly fishing spots that maybe that you've done really well at.
Well, I will start by saying that I am not really a very adventurous person by nature. Like my default is safety of sofa.
So you're saying that somebody is like pushing you out the door to do these adventures,
daredevil
then.
activities.
Yeah.
Well, I don't know if I'd put fly fishing in the daredevil camp, but
well, if you get hit with one of those lures, I mean, that's it, right?
Right. No, what I found kind of works for me, at least, is to have friends who do cooler things than I do, and that I've really felt lucky to always have had those friends. And I would start really, actually, on one thing you didn't mention, which is when I was younger in Santa Rosa, I had my next door neighbor, and still one of my best friends now is Greg Hansen, and he still lives in Santa Rosa. And in high school, he would come over at 5:30 or 6 in the morning and wake me up. In those days, you could leave your house unlocked, so he would just come into my house, and I'd wake up, and he'd be standing above my bed, or just come through the door and just say, "Let's go." And the "let's go" part meant let's go water skiing. And so I would never have water skied without Greg there to push me into doing that. And I loved it. And I wish I could still do it, kind of, but it's one of those things for younger people, probably. Right. And I've had other friends like that, and continue to have them, who have gotten me into sports like, or just activities like backpacking and fly fishing. And with the fishing, that has happened because of a couple friends, and one in particular, Hossein Ordubadian, who now lives in Half Moon Bay. And in graduate school, he put himself partly through graduate school as a fly fishing guide in Santa Fe, New Mexico. And I did not fish when I was in New Mexico, sadly, in graduate school, because I never left my safety of that sofa, because I was doing an English major, so I was reading and writing for 9 years when I was there. But after I left, he started, some things happened that allowed me to join a very good group of guys, sort of led by Hossein, in fly fishing again. And so we started on the San Juan River, which is up in the Four Corners area of Santa Fe. He had fished there for years and years, and he knew every little nook and cranny of that place. And he had shown different friends how to fly fish, and he actually built me a fly rod that I still use, and got me hooked up with all the gear and equipment. Are you a fly fisherman?
I'm not, but I've seen it. So do you have like the donut? You go out with the long pants, and you're kind of just wading out there into the water, or
well, not the donut. That's there's a name for that that's eluding me at the minute. I've actually never done the donut thing, the flotation thing, but definitely waders.
Okay.
And so yeah, you get out there in the water and kind of up but in your thigh area, and so he showed me how to select which flies to use. There's dry flies, there's wet flies. Dry sit on the top of the water, wet flies go down, like a more traditional kind of thing.
Interesting.
The how to cast is different. I had done, recreational fishing all my life. I never really liked it very much, because it's just kind of, you sit and wait. Some people like that. You can sit around and drink beers or whatever you want to do, but
you're active with that fly reel,
with a fly
right?
rod, there's action. There's something going on. And you have to be watching that fly. It's really tiny and it's out in the water, so it's moving.
Right.
So it's all in rivers mostly, not in lakes. So you have to really watch what's happening. And then when the fish comes up out of the water to take a dry fly, I have been in places, and one in particular on the Frying Pan River, which is where Ernest Hemingway would fish. Word has it. And that when you see a trout, an animal that is really an attack animal, you don't think of fish that way, but this is
Right.
the fish that's meant to chomp stuff and who is aggressive. When they come up out of that water, they see your fly, and if you can see the fish, that's another cool thing about fly fishing, is you see, usually if everything is right, you are fishing to a fish that you see in the water. You see them away. You cast your fly above the fish and let that fly drift over the top of where the fish is. And if the fish is cruising and coming up and sipping at the top of the water and taking food from the top of the water, if you put your fly right in that food chain, because down the river comes these riffles that have bugs and little things in them that the fish are eating.
Right.
You put that fly right in that riffle, so it comes right over the top of that trout, and then you see that trout come up out of the water and open its mouth and turn its head and hit the fly like bang it goes. Doesn't happen all the time like that, but it's happened enough that it feels like God has reached up into your heart and shakes it and just says, you are connected to eternity right here in this minute. When that all happens.
Because
And
that's
then,
instantaneous,
boom.
right? It's like
Yeah.
everything has to be just
Yeah.
pinpoint accurate in order for that to happen.
Everything has to be right.
Ooh.
Everything has to kind of go right. I mean, sometimes you can screw up and by mistake something happens, but really fly fishing is an exercise in golf is similar, another sport that I play, an exercise in imperfection that once in a while is just perfect. And I want to add this part to fly fishing is it's all catch and release. So we let the fish go. We're not, I mean, the process of being a fish and getting caught on a fly like that probably is not super pleasant. You do pay, there's money involved that supports the whole fish environment,
Sure.
the fish and game, all of that. And all of that is it's not a cheap thing to do all this. So there's a way to kind of justify that it's okay in the end because you're paying for the ecology and the fish are not killed. They are let go to repopulate and go on with their business. Yeah.
But sometimes they can be tasty too, right?
Yeah, they can be, but I usually just order them in the restaurant that's on the lodge next to the river. I don't supply the fish myself. Camping is similar. Hiking is similar. Again, a good friend, John Swisegood, and Monica Swisegood, the Swisegood family, fantastic people. JT Swisegood, who is the son. My son's friends with him, and so we got to know each other through the school system. Fantastic people, and they said, "Hey, let's go. We've got equipment. Let's go do some backpacking, and we'll just go. We know places. We won't hurt you. We know how great this can be for kids. It's a great family thing. I'd always kind of wanted to do it, and I took them up on it, and they took us up to Camp Lake in the Immigrant Wilderness. Really safe place, lots of kind of family types around there, and it's only 4 miles from the trailhead, and near Pinecrest, and I was hooked after that. I thought, okay, here we go. This is wonderful. And then fortunately, too, once we got back, I had a friend, Eric Peterson, who was an economics professor here at MJC for a short time. He moved away. We lost him, sadly. He's a San Diego guy at heart, and he had a chance to go back there and work there, so he left. But for the time he was here, We're playing golf together quite often. And he heard about the backpacking that I'd done, and he was a hardcore backpacker, and he had done Mount Whitney. He had done a big trip, more than 10, I think it was a 10-day trip with a bunch of 10 friends doing a 10-day backcountry trip, and he had spectacular equipment. And he's like, oh man, if you want to go, I've got everything, and my wife has got some gear and she'll let you borrow that, and you need to just do this. This is like essential for your family. And so I borrowed his stuff and we went. And by then I was fully convinced that we needed to spend some money. So my wife was on board with that after that trip. And we went to REI and never looked back, and I continue to get stuff, and Amazon shows up on my porch with the latest, greatest ultra lightweight gear.
They hook you every time with something.
They do.
Yes.
They do.
And the big thing that I don't think anyone really thinks about is once you get to certain places into the backwoods, there are no bathrooms, and there are places where you cannot utilize maybe digging a hole. You have to take a bag with you. You literally have to whatever you pack in, you're packing out, which is another to have to do that with a whole family. Maybe I think that I have to draw the line at that point.
Yeah. The wag bag.
Yes.
Familiar.
Oh, yes.
Right. You want to take a few extra Ziplocs with you.
Yes. And plenty of toilet paper as well.
That's right.
What is something that you pride yourself in?
I pride myself in not being afraid of trying new things. I've always, at least in my work, in the work that I do for online instruction and technology, if something changes with technology, I assume that it's a change for the best. And you may have heard of, there's this thing called the adoption curve, where new technology comes along and people initially hate it, and then they kind of resign themselves to it, and then they kind of say, okay, and it works for them. But I'm someone, like, if the technology changes, let's say Facebook even, like take an old interface like that, like Facebook. I hate to say it's old, but it's true now, I guess. When they make changes to it, usually they make changes for good reasons. Maybe Facebook is not the best example to use because they're usually making changes for financial reasons. So that's not a great example.
But people are normally shaking their fists.
Yeah, people are shaking their fists every time something changes. And for me, if something changes, I take it as a sign, like the engineers who built it have made it better. Like when the iPhone updates and there's a new update to put on your phone.
Right.
I love that. I'm like, the thing is going to get better. They don't make mistakes, really. But initially people are like, oh my God, I can't stand the new interface. Oh, it's so horrible. And so I do take pride on kind of taking a breath and saying, wait a minute, let's take a real look at this. There could be stuff that's good here. And then I'm able to kind of package that up and translate that for others who I'm working with, the faculty who are learning how to teach online, and show them some things that they can do with this technology that maybe they couldn't do before. So I take pride in that. I like that a lot.
What motivates you?
I guess what motivates me, honestly, to be really honest with you, is fear. And I think people don't use fear enough as a motivator. And it is fear of failure, fear of falling on your face publicly, fear of new things, fear of change. I think that when you're afraid, you prepare more. You get ready and go more. You do not procrastinate. If you have an exam coming up, I'm talking about this a lot with my kids, right now they're in college, and And they're classic kids. They're just college kids. But I got through it myself because of fear, like fear of not getting through it. And so that meant that I just hit it hard. And that has always motivated me. And the rest of it I didn't really care about. I just used it always as a tool to get a lot of stuff done. Like fear of letting people down. That's another big one. Like when you do work collaboratively, and a lot of the work I do is collaborative, I have the privilege of working with some fantastic people. And in the role that I have too, I'm working with a lot of other faculty, and you just cannot let them down. So you work harder if you're afraid of letting them down. And that's really my motivator is fear.
Wow.
Be honest.
Excellent.
I wish my kids had a little more of it. Yeah.
Maybe that's just a generational thing. I don't
Maybe.
know. What do you like about the MJC community as a whole?
I love that question. The thing about MJC that I don't think people really understand, that I immediately, the minute I got out of that car and met those people that interviewed me, is that you can do almost anything you want here. Like it really is an open place. Like I have always felt like, hey, if I've got a good idea or something I want to try and do, you don't hear no as often as you hear it in other places. It could be, and I recognize we all have different roles, and you have to have a good boss.
Right.
You have to have good people around that boss. The boss has a boss. So you can't go way out in left field. But if you want to start something up or do something or try something, and we might as well be transparent about the fact that you're talking to a faculty person, and faculty do have a lot of latitude. And I think at MJC, the thing I really like about it is that if you're interested in something, you can do that thing for the most part. And I have worked in lots of places where that is not true. So you get to find your little nook and be happy there. And if you get tired of that place, you can create a new one, go to a new spot, do a different thing. There's always a chance to kind of pursue what you're interested in, and even as your interests change, you can do that new thing. I know that's not the case for everybody. It's not the case for, sometimes depends on who your boss is. It depends on whether you're a faculty or staff or administration. It depends on who the upper administration is, and that changes quite often, and the whole tempo and vibe changes. But when that happens, you just kind of quiet down for a little while and let time pass, and then pretty soon new people are along and the moment changes, and then you're allowed to pursue that thing. So that's a part of MJC that I really like, and I certainly like the camaraderie I feel at MJC, the family feel, and I know that's something that is intentionally created and maintained and nurtured. There's a lot of talk about that. I think there is a big investment there. Once in a while, it doesn't feel so family oriented when things go wrong, and then suddenly people disappear and you never hear about them again. We don't talk about them and they're gone. But for the most part, I think the underlying core of it is a genuine effort to be a community.
Where are some of your favorite places to eat?
Well, just last night, in fact, ate at Commonwealth with a couple of friends from my wife is in the running world, and I've kind of latched on to her friends in the running world, and they're wonderful people. And so I was just there, and I thought the food was delicious, and I know it's been featured in diners and drive-ins for good reason. And I think I wish it weren't quite so loud in there. It's sort of a concrete echo box, but the food is good and the friends around you make it really nice, and the beer is pretty darn good too.
They've got a rather large selection of beers there, that's for sure. Tell us a funny story or experience that you've had.
Well, one kind of thing that happened is that there I was in Rome. I like that start of the story.
In the actual
Rome.
Okay. Yes.
No, wait.
I like it already.
No, this is a terrible. I'm not very good at telling jokes, so wasn't Rome actually. It was Seville, Spain, Sevilla.
Okay.
Yes, another exotic location. And I was there with my kids at that time. My son was 12 years old, and my daughter was, I think, 15. And we're in Spain, and I had one of my goals in life is to try to learn Spanish, and I just continue to be sucky at it. I am terrible at it. But I continue to try, and I've taken a lot of classes, and I lived for a year in Ecuador, and I took a lot of Spanish when I was in Ecuador and teaching in Ecuador. Still probably would starve if I had to be alone in a Spanish-speaking country. But anyway, I can look the part. My skin is a little bit darker-ish, unusual, not descript exactly, and in the summertime especially, and I can kind of buy the right clothes to sort of blend in. So I don't wear Bermuda shorts and polo shirt and whatever and
carry a camera around with you.
Right,
You're not a tourist.
Right. I don't do that.
You're right.
So I always feel good when people approach me in a country like that and ask me directions. And when we were in Sevilla that time, that happened no less than 4 times over. I think we were there for like 2 weeks or maybe 3 weeks. And that happened that many times. And I was like, oh, be darn, this is like, I'm looking pretty good here. And one time, this guy, and I was with my son, and we were near the Flamenco Museum, which I think is if you have not been to that spot, it's one of the little wonderful, spectacular places in the world to go to. And it's, they perform there. Also, it's not just a museum, but they perform, flamenco is performed by the government there. So it's sponsored heritage kind of thing. And we had been there, and we were outside. It was just my son and I, and a gentleman he was a Spanish guy. And in Spanish, I mean, he looked the part. He had a fedora hat on, and he was a great big guy. And he came over, and he was kind of walking sort of fast with his family. So he's from another part of Spain, I'm guessing. I'm not sure.
Okay. And
he said, ¿Dónde está la Puerta del Carne? To me. And I'm like, ¿Dónde? And I repeated this back. Like, ¿Dónde está la Puerta del Carne? Yeah. Do you speak Spanish? Are you?
No.
No.
All right. I can ask you where the bathroom is. That's about as far as I can go.
That's about the end of my limit too. But, and when I repeated the question back to him, he immediately heard my lack of an accent. And he said, oh, da, 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 da. And he just put his hands up and shook them and walked away quickly. And my son, Calvin, said, Dad, what did he say? What did he say? And I said, well, he said, where is the meat door? And I'm like, and Calvin, my son, said, what? Where is the meat door? And I still, to this day, I have no idea. And I repeated that story to my Spanish-speaking friends like Tony Pacheco in the Spanish department here at MJC. And I was like, ¿Dónde está la Puerta del Carne? And he's like, no, it could not have been that. But that stands out in my mind, that even though I was successful in looking the part, like I knew where I was going, that I actually lived in this beautiful town.
Are you sure you weren't standing next to like a salami factory?
No,
Okay.
no. All right. I actually did kind of look around, like, is there some kind of butcher here or what? But
Right.
I've heard that, no, that's not what somebody would have asked. So I must have misheard the guy, but I kind of don't think I did. So he's probably still looking for the meat door to this
Where
day.
is the meat door?
Yeah.
That's hilarious. Oh, let me ask you this: who has been one of your biggest influences, either personally or professionally?
Well, my mind right now goes immediately to professionally, and it's an easy answer, and that would be the great Michelle Pacansky-Brock. And she, I think of as the fairy godmother of online instruction for California community college teachers. She is the ultimate trainer of trainers, and her work and approach to teaching and the love she brings to it have influenced, I think, more students in California. I did a calculation. I wrote her a recommendation letter once, and I did a little math, and I calculated that, I forget, it was like hundreds of thousands of students have been affected by her pedagogy and what she does and what she models. And often I find myself, if I'm in a, in my job, I get a lot of what might be called silly questions or kind of things that I think people who are teaching should know probably better, or maybe not. I don't know. But when you've been doing it, like I've been doing it for over a decade, the danger can be, as you get older and you're in your job or you're a teacher, that you get to be crusty and surly and negative, and you radiate this kind of just tired, irritated vibe. And so I'm very aware of that tendency, and I refuse to let that infect what I do. I refuse. So I kind of make it a game that I never give a hint of that a feeling. Even if I feel a flash of it, I immediately overcome that, and I react. A lot of my interactions are through email, as you might imagine. So I put my doctorate in English to good use. Never thought I would need to get a doctorate in English to be able to write the perfectly toned email that explains how to do this and that kind of thing. But that's sort of where I've put it to its best use. But I often find myself thinking, what would Michelle do? What would Michelle do in this situation? And what Michelle would do is bring it every single time, 100%, full throttle commitment. And she does it really with love. That's the best word to describe it. So I totally follow in her very big footsteps, and I've been lucky. I've got a grant with her, and if I could brag for half a second, I thought of an idea that paralleled something that she was doing, and both of our interests kind of coalesced at the right time in the right circumstance, and then a grant possibility came along. And she's a spectacular kind of writer in addition to everything else that she does well. And so when I suggested this and proposed this, she thought about it for about 2 seconds, and she said, I think we should do that. And so she has done all the heavy lifting on this thing, and it's been a great going on 5 years now project with her, where we have just worked together through Zoom. I mean, we were Zooming way before Zooming was cool, and in the pandemic, way before that. And so we were just, when the pandemic came along, we were just used to this. And
Right,
it was,
right.
normal operation for us. But so I've had a lot more interaction with her, and I've been able to really continue to learn and grow from her and see how she goes about doing things. And so she's the person that I think has inspired me the most. Yeah.
It's too bad we didn't put some money in the stock for Zoom before this whole thing kicked off.
Oh, right.
My
I
gosh.
know. Totally.
Jeez.
I remember when the pandemic started, and at that time, our president, I remember the conversation, and it was with Chad Red Wing was there, and Curtis Martin, and Jim Hoopus, who was our president then. And the pandemic had just begun, and we were just starting to talk about closing down. And I said to the president, I'm like, there is this thing called Zoom, and we don't have to stop. We can continue if people know how to use Zoom. And he thought, okay, well, if that's a thing that could work, let's figure that out. And it wasn't like I thought of that, the whole country, the whole world at the same time was looking for how can we do this. But I just remember that conversation on the way out of the Morris building that the three of us had. They were headed to a Senate meeting, and I wasn't, but I was with them for another meeting, and they were going off in that direction toward the library. So we walked out of the Morris building, and it's one of those pivotal sort of moments that you kind of look back on. Wow, that was the start of a whole new way of doing things that we're still feeling.
Crazy.
Yeah.
Crazy. If you had a free plane ticket to anywhere in the world, where would you go and why?
I think I would go to Tokyo. I have not been there. I'm kind of trying to convince my kids to go there, to do some kind of exchange or something there. I heard, I listen to a lot of different podcasts, and one of the podcasts that I listen to is the Tim Ferriss Show, and don't hold judgment. I don't always listen to every episode or anything like that. And I know he can kind of rub some people the wrong way, but one thing that he did that himself and did some exchange stuff when he was in college there. And he just talks about it as if it's one of the few places where you need to you go and you don't speak, nobody speaks English. I mean, people in Tokyo would speak English. Maybe it wouldn't be Tokyo, but a place around Tokyo or something.
Right.
But there is zero crime. The alphabet is totally different, so you can't read anything, and nobody speaks English. And
but maybe somebody's going to come ask you where the meat door is.
Right. But I just really like the idea. It's like you can get on the subway there and be completely lost and not speak any of the language or read any of the signs at all.
Right.
And still you're okay. You will be safe. You will not get hurt. And through signing or however, people will help you, and you'll get to where you need to go, and it'll be all right. And it'll just push you way outside your comfort zone, but it's not like outside your comfort zone in a way that would truly threaten you, your mortal existence or anything. You're not going to have a problem. You're just going to not be in your comfort zone. So it's like skydiving with a guarantee of not crashing. That's my kind of adventure.
Just an exercise in humanitarianism, I guess.
That's exactly right. A great way to think about it. Yeah.
Well, if you had only 3 albums to listen to for the rest of your life, and only 3, which 3 albums would you choose and why?
I would choose Willie Nelson, Stardust.
Ooh.
Yeah.
I love it already.
Yeah. Okay.
I don't mean to jump onto your.
No, that's
The-
fine.
You know what? When I was a kid, that was one of the albums that I grew up listening to.
Me too.
Oh,
Me
I
too.
love it. I love it to death.
Yeah, me too. Totally. And those are all covers. That's no songs that he wrote, and he's a great songwriter. But I think that's when he was at the peak of his performing ability, and it ties me to my childhood. That's music I grew up with hearing when I was young, and it's still it's a little bit like Patsy Cline, just kind of just perfect in its way. And so that's one. Another from high school would be Led Zeppelin's last album, In Through the Outdoor.
Okay.
And that's just because I have some great memories of that time. And I've heard that music when you're 17, the songs you hear when you're 17 embed in some kind of deep subconscious way that never leaves you for the rest of your days. And so that's right where I was then. And the guy that used to take me water skiing, he got that album. He lived next door, and so we'd go over to his house and he'd play it, and great big wood speakers. And that first song, it starts so kind of slowly, and there's some weird music going on. And then when the true song begins, it's just another, it's like I was talking about with fly fishing. It's like it reaches in and shakes your heart. And so that's one. That whole album, just because of the time and place, would be one. And then another one, and also from a time and a place in graduate school. The 90s were great years for me, fantastic years for me. I was in school, graduate school, all those years. I met my wife by then. We were not married, but we had this long thing going on, and really good friends around us, and no kids, and just a whole different jam in Albuquerque, which is a super cool town. If you have not been there, I totally recommend it. It's really a distinct culture there unto itself. Sometimes you can go from town to town and you can't really tell the difference, but Albuquerque is a different world, and I'm so glad I still have reasons to go there. But and in those years it was Pink Floyd and Dark Side of the Moon, and so we would listen to that a lot. And again, it was a roommate of mine, another really good friend, Ted. And Ted would introduce me to Pink Floyd in a really good way, and he was not afraid to play that album over and over and over. And so that also takes me back to that time when I hear it.
He wasn't timing it with the Wizard of Oz at that time, was he? And making all of those connections with the. No.
Not that I'm aware of. No. Yeah. So those are the three I would take to that desert island, probably.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Well, do you have any parting words of encouragement for us?
Yeah, I do, and I would tell people to just. I mean, I think I don't know who this is mainly intended for. I tend to think like parting words of wisdom. There's one thing I tell the faculty that I work with. I was going to say that I teach. I don't really teach faculty. I help facilitate experiences so that faculty can be at their best.
Right.
How about that? That's a nice way to put it. But I sometimes I try to remind them, like, you became a professor, a teacher, because you loved something. There was something about you majored in something that got you through college, that got you through graduate school, because there was a thing that you really enjoyed doing. And don't be afraid to show what you really love to the students or the people that are around you. Like, sometimes people get a little caught up in the professionalism of being a teacher, or you don't have to be a teacher, of the profession of this is my thing, and I have to be kind of this certain way. They have an idealized stylized image of whatever that might be. And so they're acting to a part. And sometimes acting to a part dilutes the passion that is so humanly humanized you and your core. And you forget about that part. And I don't know about you, but I don't think any of my professors that I had when I was in school taught me anything. Not a single one taught me anything. But what they did show me was passion. I remember those people. I remember the enthusiasm. And it wasn't like they were doing jumping jacks or anything of cartwheels of joy in the classroom, but I remember the passion for stuff that I didn't really care about that infected me with that passion. I started to get it. It started to send tingles into me. So it wasn't like, oh, let me show you how to do X and Y, or here's what a comma splice is. Now pay attention. It wasn't that. Instead, it was the joy of being in a room with people who are trying to learn some new things and just showing them that, if you are your humanized, genuine self, that will inspire your students far more than any specific content that you are trying to show them. Show them the passion that will energize them to learn the stuff that you're trying to teach them on their own. That's it. You get that? You've done your work.
Mike, thank you so much for allowing us to get a window, just a small window, into your life and your passions and everything. I'm truly. I mean, you had me at the Willie Nelson album, to be honest with you, right there. That's certainly one of my favorites as well. Thank you so much for being here and doing the podcast. I really appreciate it.
It's been a pleasure. Thank you very much for having me.
Well, the winds are picking up and the barnacles are collecting on the bow. Time for us to set sail, me hearties. This episode was brought to you by Roxanne's Red Light District. Produced by that guy sitting all alone in his pub. Yeah, that's me. Edited by that bird that gets on my last nerve. Yeah, that's you, Patchy. And music by the Honky Tonk Man Band. Hey, that's it, folks, but stay tuned for the next episode. And as always, remember, keep your booty close and your sword sharp, lest you find yourself swabbing the deck on the bottom of Davy Jones's locker. Until we meet again.